Hey, everybody, I'm Pat Petrillo. You're watching AVJ Jazz Talk Live, and thanks, Gail Boyd, for having me on. This is very cool. And streaming live on Facebook and all over on all these platforms is a fantastic way for all of us to connect and for me to meet some new friends and meet a new audience. And those of you who are familiar with me, I thank you for the support all these years. But if you're not, um, I'm a drum set player, a drummer and percussionist, and I'm based in New Jersey, work in New York, I work in Philly, and I have quite a vast amount of experience in a variety of genres, not just jazz. As a matter of fact, I probably came into jazz later than most, I would say. I wouldn't call myself a jazz musician. Um, Depending on your, definition of a jazz musician, I would say that, David Sanborn. I remember reading an article or actually watching him when he used to have his show on television. Say, I'm not a jazz musician. I play in that subgenre of whether it's R&B or soul or fusion or whatever it's being called, the flavor of the moment. It's all good. It all stems from New Orleans and it's all American music. So that is the bottom line for me anyway. So my story is being a drummer. I started at a very, very early age. I'd say about maybe 6 or 7, 5, 6 or 7, something like that. Just started as a young boy. My older brother was in a band, and I used to sit behind the drums whenever on break. And my thing was I grew up listening to the Beatles, so the Beatles was pretty far from jazz, right? But that was kind of my first thing in listening to just a lot of popular music, and so I sort of backed into playing jazz. It's all a derivative, right? So I grew up listening to Ringo, and then through that, probably listening to those records. And in my neighborhood where I grew up in New Jersey, there was a lot of diversity, a lot of different kinds of music everywhere on FM radio. So I quickly started hearing the music of Motown and James Brown and Booker T and the MGs and soul and R&B. And then so that was to me like a 180. So I went from like Ringo to like James Brown in like one afternoon. So my whole thing kind of came um through those subgenres. And then I started, as I'm backing my way, I guess into jazz. I guess my first foray into jazz and knowing about jazz was listening to some early records that my dad had as well, through the big bands. My dad, I was like the third child, so I was like the young guy, and my father had grew up in the dance halls, in the 40s and stuff like that. And so I had a lot of Tommy Dorsey records, some Benny Goodman stuff, and some Duke Ellington records, and Count Basie records, and compilation jazz records. And so my dad, loved the jazz dance bands, not necessarily, the bebop stuff or um so the jazz that I listened to me, I loved it because it was a groove. So to me, it was still, it was different. It was swinging, but but it's backbeat to me. Sounds like any kind of shuffle or anything like that because that's where it comes from. So I listened. I would just go down and like I had just a pile of records, so I'd play my brother's Beatles records, and then I'd play a any one of my dad's compilation records, that he had, the Dorsey band or any of them. Then I'd put on like a James Brown record. And then as I got older, I started learning a lot more about jazz fusion and things like that. But I guess the first real jazz artist that I really learned about as a drummer was Buddy Rich. You just hear it in school talking about, the Buddy Rich big band. And this was in the 70s. So he was still doing his thing quite strong. And so my first jazz concert was the Buddy Rich big band. And that was a lot of fun because, you hear about this thunderous drummer and this amazing guy. And so I went with a group of friends, probably about 13 ish. I want to say this was in mid 70s. And yeah, something like that. And so, we got to the venue. It was at a hotel ballroom. We got to the venue pretty early, and like really early, like hours before. And I, opened the door and I walked in and we, had our tickets and peeked into the ballroom. And there's Buddy setting up his drums with some other guy, but he was doing his, he had a tech, a roadie, but he wasn't, he was doing it himself. And I was like just flabbergasted, like there's the man, So I just kept like, you know, inching up, inching up, inching up. And I think he kind of caught me out of the corner of his eye and he see me and I kind of froze like a deer in the headlights, and he goes, "You a drummer?" And I said, yes, yeah, I play drums. He goes, "You know your rudiments?" And at the time I was in drum corps actually. So I said, "Yeah, I'm practicing rudiments." He goes, "Rudiments." He said, "Good. Got to learn your rudiments to be a good drummer." Just like that, or something to that effect. And so now I'm like, it's like listening to the voice of Oz, you know what I mean? Now I'm like the cowardly lion. I'm like, woo, I'm starting to shake a little bit. So I back away and I say, "Okay, well," he goes, "You coming to the show or something like that?" I said, "Yes." I go, "Okay, see you later," or whatever. And so watch the show, just, it was just on fire. I could, there's smoke in the room because you could smoke indoors, of course. And, there was smoke on the stage, there was smoke in the theater, and it was just like this sound of power in the drums was just like amazing. So after the show, he has a signing area and you could buy swag and all that stuff. So, he's sitting in this big chair and all that and waiting online to get his autograph and got the book and all that. And I, shook his hand and said hello. I said, "It was great." I said, "Yeah, I saw you setting up the drums." He goes, "Ah, did you like the show?" He said, I said, "Yeah, it was great." He goes, "All right, keep practicing, play those rudiments," or something like that, and I got him to sign this here. So this hangs in my studio. And it was literally, that's pretty much what he looked like that night, smoking a cigarette, hanging out. And this is, this piece of history that I'll never forget, and having, and he signed thousands of autographs, I'm sure, but that was my first brush with jazz royalty right there, and that was pretty amazing. So Buddy was one of a kind. And so I guess that was one of my first things. And then I got into jazz fusion as I got into college. That started to be a thing. I got turned on to like groups like Weather Report, early Spyro Gyra, which was, Eli Konikoff on drums. And then first got turned on to the great Steve Gadd, who's just an amazing person. He's just a sweetheart of a man, as well as amazing drummer, as we know. And Steve was probably my first drum hero other than Ringo, because Steve could do anything and can do anything. Steve can swing, he can shuffle, he can groove, he can play Latin styles, he can solo, of course. He's got it all. He's a complete drummer, complete musician, complete drummer. Doesn't overplay, but what he does play is fire when he has to play, but plays for the song, plays the sweetest quarter note swing you ever want to hear. Just an, amazing guy, and getting to know him and be friends, honored to call him a friend all the years that I've known him, has been very um, motivational for me, encouraging. And it's been a highlight to help me in my development, listening to all his records on the great, everything he did with Al Jarreau and Chick Corea, of course, and Return to Forever, and you name it. Al Di Meola. So Gadd was my next biggest drum hero. I guess the next thing that I did, person that I met jazz drummer wise, um, I started when I got back from college. I went to school at Morehead State University in Kentucky. Morehead State, great, great music program, excellent percussion program. I was in the jazz band's percussion ensemble and everything. So I graduated from there, came back to Jersey, and I started going into the city and studying at Drummers Collective in New York. Then I started teaching there, and I just started going to the clubs and meeting people and networking and such. And started meeting some excellent musicians. I started working in Broadway pits. One of my teachers got me my first gig on Broadway, subbing a lot on a chorus line, the original production, which was a lot of fun, which has that good old jazz two beat, ding, da, da, ding, da, da, da. So, jazz is everywhere. When you open your ears, you'll hear it. So, getting to learn to play jazz and two beat and shuffles and all of that, and cutting my teeth in Broadway pits and stuff. And I went to a show. First of all, there's a lot more clubs in New York than there are now. There is great, great jazz clubs, many of which I played in the Bottom Line, which was an amazing place, had all kinds of music. The Lone Star Roadhouse, 7th Avenue South, where I would go and hear, the Breckers, Peter Erskine on drums, who I studied with when he was in Manhattan, Jocko. So many great clubs in the 80s in the city. It's unfortunate that they're not around anymore. Anyway, and then there was a place called Sweet Basil. Sweet Basil, an amazing venue, had one big long table in the middle and a few on the sides. So I guess my next drum hero in jazz is Art Blakey, because of to me, Blakey was like a groove jazz timekeeper. Just, just a little unorthodox, with his grip and the way he played. He was, and then as a leader, and which inspired me to kind of lead my own bands too. But as a leader, as a mentor to other musicians, whether it's Terrence Blanchard. I mean, the list is endless, right? So I saw Art Blakey, and I wish I could find my record. I know I have it somewhere, at Sweet Basil. And I actually brought my parents, because I knew as I said, my dad grew up listening a lot to the big bands and stuff like that. And I said, Dad, I want to take you guys into the city, and I want to to see Art Blakey and the Jazz Messengers. So we went, and it was an amazing concert, and we had food, and it was just an amazing, amazing music. Talk about fire in the gut. So afterwards, he had records there live at Sweet Basil. So I bought the record, and then had to get him to sign it. So I kind of inched my way up to the front of the stage, and my mom said, just go. So I went up to the front of the stage, and I could see him back there, and he wasn't really coming out into the crowd, but I saw him back there, and I handed it to somebody. I said, can you please have him sign it to Pat? And I seen him hand it, and he looked over, and I waved, and he signed it, and I got it back. So I have that over in my studio as well. I just got to find it. But Art Blakey, big influence for me. Jimmy Cobb, another great jazz drummer, influence for me, just by playing that cross stick. And just playing that, ting, 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 ta. To me, that's jazz. That's all you need. You don't need all that facility. You don't need to be a great, technical player to play jazz. And I think that's the thing that a lot of people get caught up in. They get afraid of jazz, especially drummers, because I can't play it so hard, all this coordination. It's really not, man. It's groove is groove is groove, whether it's swung or eighth note, straight eighth note, it's just time. ACM, which is more eighth note jazz. Time is time, and pocket and groove is groove. Jazz has a pocket just like everything else. Okay. And so I listening to those great, those Miles records with Jimmy Cobb and Blakey and stuff. And then, like Peter Erskine turned me on to Elvin, and then it's like, okay, that's a whole nother bag of stuff. But, influence for me. But I play jazz. My groups, we don't really do a jazz set uh, with the big rhythm band. We do, we do a little bit. We do some shuffles. We'll do, Friday night at the Cadillac Club, or we'll do some real jump blues stuff, up tempo. But it's more groove, more pocket stuff. So yeah, so that's kind of like my background in listening to jazz, and how I grew up in New York. Was a great scene, because you can go listen to bebop at this club, and you can go uptown at McKell's, which is another great place, which I used to play a bunch of times, and go see Steve Gadd play with Stuff or something like that. So there's so much music, and New York's a little bit different now, but yeah. So that was like my cutting my teeth when I was younger, in the jazz scene, or in the New York scene at that time. And then being from New Jersey, got involved with some, rock artists, and playing in blues and rock stuff. And yeah, so I mean, fast forward, having played with different people in Broadway, I ended up meeting a guy as well, Ed Hamilton from Philly. So I worked in Philly as well. And he introduced me to Jose Rossi, who was a percussionist who was in Weather Report, actually, and was in Patti LaBelle's band. He introduced me, got me an audition. I had a gig with Patti LaBelle. Um, I played with Gloria Gaynor. I've backed a bunch of different artists: Debbie Gibson, Constantine Maroulis, Glenn Burtnick, singer songwriter. So just a variety of artists and genres is kind of my thing. Um, so you can read more about me, I guess, on my website, which is patpdrummer.com. And on my website is my bio, as well as places, a spot where you can get my record, what I'm going to talk about now, which is my latest record, which is the Power Station Sessions. As you all know, the Power Station in New York City. This is now available on all platforms, as you can see, and it features some great artists: John Popper, Nile Rodgers, Oz Noy, great guitarist, the great Lenny Pickett, Felicia Collins, amazing guitar player, the aforementioned Glenn Burtnick on a vocal cut, a Beatles cut that I did. But this is a very diverse record, um, and there's some originals as well as covers. And the record right now, that's this track that's getting a lot of smooth jazz and jam band radio airplay, is the track 48th Street, that features Nile Rodgers. I wrote that with Nile in mind, in particular, because I really grew up listening to Chic a lot, and they cut at the Power Station. So I figured, what better way to have the Power Station Sessions than to have Nile Rodgers on my record. Just a sweetheart of a guy and a great musician, really diverse. And he's another musician who grew up playing jazz in the clubs in New York City. We had a great conversation about his journey from early beginnings of playing in jazz clubs and stuff like that, and even weddings and club dates, and how he cut his teeth playing jazz. So the Power Station Sessions is again recorded at Studio C at the Power Station in New York City. 48th Street features Nile Rodgers. We did a great version of Big Man on Mulberry Street, which is the Billy Joel cut, which is a great tune that my buddy Liberty DeVito played on. And they cut that track at the Power Station, which I didn't know until I spoke to Liberty about it. He says, "Yeah, man, we cut it in the same room that you played." So that was really some really great karma, And so we did a little more up-tempo version of that with horn. So it's basically a horn band that covers the potpourri of rhythms, big rhythms, whether it's blues, R&B, soul, funk, fusion. But it's a very diverse record. So if you check out the Power Station Sessions and you're expecting a straight ahead jazz record or a regular big band, it ain't your dad's big band. So it's not really a big band record, but it is, because it's got, a full horn section, a full rhythm section, but we're covering a lot of different genres. So we got some blues shuffles. We did a cover of Steely Dan's Black Cow, with which Oz Noy played on. He did a phenomenal job on that. Uh, and then we also, Earth, Wind, and Fire was a huge influence on me as well. The great Fred White, rest in peace, he just passed away. There's a track called Runnin'. Those of you familiar with Earth, Wind, and Fire probably know that really well. We did a cool arrangement of Runnin', and I did a little drum solo on that. The only drum solo on the drum record, on the drummer's record. Okay, so it's really it's not a drummy kind of record. It's a music record, but we did a cool cover of that. We covered Stevie's "Knocks Me Off My Feet," which was also a smooth jazz track, which has been on radio quite a bit. We did, my love for New Orleans jazz and the roots of American music. We did a great version of "Hey Pocky Way," which was a lot of fun. We did a Beatles cover, "It Won't Be Long," which Glenn Burtnick sang on. And then I wrote a track called "Asbury Daze," Daze, which is going to bring you back to, that Jersey Shore horn band, bluesy, Southside Johnny and the Asbury Jukes sound, this big horns and just a real like grooving, rocking track. So it's a very diverse contemporary, if you can call it contemporary jazz record. It's not a smooth jazz record. Although the track 48th Street, we did a smooth radio edit, which is what you hear on Smooth Jazz Radio now. Don't tell Niall we had to cut out his guitar solo. Shh. But only for the smooth jazz version. So that record, again, available on all platforms, and you can get this if you want a CD or an album. We have some vinyl. And for the first time, I heard vinyl has outsold CDs, I think, for the first time. So we have CDs on my site, which is, again, patpdrummer.com. And you can get a vinyl or a CD. We have T-shirts as well. You can get that CD or vinyl, as well as my first record with the Big Rhythm Band, which is the Abbey Road Sessions. Yes, I went to Abbey Road, Studio 2, which was, if you remember, the Beatles were my original first love of music. And we went into Studio 2 and sat right where Ringo sat. And we did some great horn band arrangements. And we used the actual pianos that were used on the tracks that the Beatles cut, the Mrs. Mills and the Challen, the organ, everything, all the keyboards that were there, we used. And on this record, you can get this on my site as well. We did Magical Mystery Tour. We did Lady Madonna, which we used the actual piano on Lady Madonna. We did Martha, My Dear, Savoy Truffle, which was not recorded at Abbey Road. It was recorded at Trident, the Beatles. We did a great version of Obladi Obladska, I called it. Got to Get You Into My Life, which is a mashup of the original and the Earth, Wind, and Fire version. So we my two big influences there. So you can get both of these, the Power Station Sessions and the Abbey Road Sessions, on my site at patpdrummer.com, which is right there. So thank you, Gail, for that. And so that's kind of where the project is now. We're looking at hopefully doing some gigs in the summer into the fall. I'm actually working on a new record already. I have some stuff that I have previously worked on that I have in a can somewhere. So we're starting to dig that out and going into the studio tomorrow to start sifting through some demo stuff and start to get ready for another record, which I'm not sure where we'll record it. Maybe we'll record it at a different place, maybe in Muscle Shoals, at Fame Studio in Muscle Shoals. That might be fun. Or maybe Sunset Sound in Hollywood. I would love to record there. So I'm not sure where we're going to do the next record, but so that's what's happening with us in the Big Rhythm Band. I thank you for all the support, everybody that has downloaded the record, and the radio stations and the DJs that are playing 48th Street, as well as Knocks Me Off My Feet. We greatly appreciate it. Thank you very much for your support. In terms of the business, in wrapping this up in your career and everything, it's not easy to do your own thing. But if you have the talent and you have, it takes more than a passion and a dream. You got to have the skill set and you got to have a thick skin. So if I had any advice to younger musicians that are going through the industry, carve your own path, have a thick skin, but have a plan, have good people around you, have a good support system, but know your craft. Study, evolve, learn, grow. Always get your ears out there, what's happening musically. Okay, because we're all standing on each other's shoulders as musicians. I'm standing on Steve Gadd's shoulders, who's standing on Jimmy Cobb's shoulders, and we're all just doing this, and learning from each other and growing. And so have a plan, study your craft, study your instrument, no matter what it is. Get better on your instrument. Okay, you won't get better as a musician if you close your ears. So you got to keep your ears open, listen to a variety of music. um, I think now more than ever with social media, um, it's at your fingertips. We had to go search out the records. We hear something on the radio, we'd have to get on the bikes and go down to the record store and see if they have it. If they didn't have it, you'd have your mom drive you to the other side of town so you could find the record or whatever. These days, it's at your fingertips, and most of it is free. But that's another discussion. Well, I'm going to get into that. But anyway, study your craft, learn about the industry, learn about different types of music, different genres, and get better at your instrument, whether it's the drum set, bass guitar. You're going to play upright, electric, 5 string, 6 string. If you're a sax player, you can't just play alto, you got to play tenor. You should also learn to play flute. So, there's a lot to learn if you're a musician coming into the industry. So get good at your craft, study at a school, take some lessons. Don't just try to learn online. You have to interact with other people and other musicians. Don't just think, oh, I'm going to join this website and I'm going to learn to be a musician. You might learn what buttons to push, but you're not going to learn to be a musician online. You only learn to be a musician by playing with other people and studying with people and interacting with people. That's how you become a musician. Okay. So please do that. Also support artists, please. I say this in every interview that I do. Please support the artists. Please purchase their music. Please do these things that help the art perpetuate itself so that there's art for you when you get older. Okay. So please get out there, perpetuate the art. Buy somebody's, if you're at a show, buy the CD, buy a vinyl. Even if you don't have a vinyl player, man, just buy it. You'll get one day. Just buy a t-shirt, buy something. Just support the artists, because that's the way that this whole thing works, and we all help each other. So that's really the most important advice that I can give you. Hone your craft, learn your craft, study, and I don't want to say network with other musicians. That sounds a little cold, networking. Hello, it's not like that. It's you develop relationships. You get to know somebody and then you see them again and you talk some more. Then you see them again and you talk some more. It's not just a contact. You develop a friendship or relationship with somebody. And that person could hopefully then kind of recommend you for, something else down the road. That's kind of how things work. You develop a teamwork and you get you develop a rapport with other musicians. And also, you only get one chance to make a good first impression. You only get one shot. You only get one shot. So check your ego out the door. Always be humble. There's always somebody better and there's always somebody worse. If you keep that in mind, you'll be just fine. Don't compare yourself to anybody. Just do you. Be the best you can be. Practice hard though. Study, learn, and evolve. And it's okay to say, "Oh man, he's really good. I should learn something from him," even if he's your peer. Yeah, you can, because there's somebody maybe learning from you. That's the way it goes. So we're always learning from each other. So keep that in mind. Um, so that's the advice that I would have for you guys, and that was passed down, to me from others as well. So hopefully that has, helped you. In wrapping up here, I just want to say thanks to Gail for having me. Thank you to also, uh, um, I want to thank. Wait, real quick. Yeah, I just want to make sure. My record plugger, Neil Sapper, I want to thank him. And also my PR manager, Scott Thompson. Thank you very much. for recommending that I do this. So Scott Thompson, PR, he's been a lot of help for this. And again, Neil Sapper, thank you very much. I want to thank Alan Kepler from Smooth Jazz Network. It's been a very big help. And people at smoothjazz.com, Sandy Shore. A lot of people have been helpful in making this record happen and what it is and getting it out there. So I thank you all very much. And Gail, thank you again for having me. Peace and love. Peace and love. Be kind to one another. PatPDrummer.com. We'll see you soon.